Thank you. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the cabinet meeting of the 9th of February 2022. Quite a agenda this evening with some heavy items. So first of all, policies for absence. Minutes to approve as correct record of the minutes of January 20. Items of urgent business. I've not received any additional items of business for the meeting, although we're on to item 14, which I'll be bringing forward. I'll explain that shortly. There have been letters that have been received in relation so moving on to like 4 declarations of interest. Have you got any declarations of interest in the most decisions we make? And then my statement. So as I said, we've got a pretty packed agenda this evening, and it's here to outline mainly for the budget. So council have yet again have to explain complex parts of the budget and deliver the reality of the situation, not just snippets that some people might want to use to snatch headlines. I'm sure we will go to great lengths to explain the investment strategy and not just highlight the interest paid, but also what the interest paid brings in additional services. And also probably updating everybody on the different capital spend on buildings, for instance, and revenue spending on services. For a year on year. But moving on to the COVID situation, the last 2 weeks have seen significant changes in the rules and guidance as the country's moved back into Plan A measures. The new measures bring in some positive changes, for especially those who have been vaccinated, but it is still an ever-changing situation. And as an example of that, on Friday, the requirements to take a COVID test before or after arrival is scrapped. So as I say, the pandemic's been a fast-moving and ever-changing situation, which, as we all know, has required many changes to the rules and guidance, sometimes repeatedly in a week. We heard from the PM today, it's likely that planned further lifting of restrictions may well be brought forward in the following weeks. So one of the best ways to make sure everyone keeps playing their part, stay up to date on the rules, is to go to the .gov.uk site, the coronavirus pages, and that's the best resource to keep track of the latest guidance as it changes. It explains clearly all the current rules, as well as outlining the recent changes and updates for everyone. By making sure we know all the rules, and not just those that we think we know, or pick up from the media, social media, or family or friends, we can keep playing our part, but at the same time, not needlessly imposing restrictions that are no longer applicable. Much of the positive changes have been thanks to the effective COVID vaccine programme and the delivery of the booster programme throughout the country. However, Thurrock remains one of the lowest vaccinated populations in the country. So to help with this, earlier this week, we saw the first 2 pop-up vaccination centres, one in Aveley and one in South Hockingham, to help deliver locally. There will be a lot more of these to follow. The vaccination centre will be temporarily established in the heart of the communities across the borough, serving neighbourhoods individually. There will also be, in the coming weeks, more details shared on one of the social medias where you can take up the vaccine if you haven't already had it. On top of this, vaccine champions from the volunteer service will also be out and about in our community, sharing the vaccine message and helping to ensure everyone has access to the right information so they can make an informed decision which they can offer. These teams are working hard and looking at other ways to encourage as many people as possible within the borough vaccination. Moving on to environmental alerts. Later in the meeting, we'll discuss the proposal to introduce a single-use plastic policy, which demonstrates one of our commitments to sustainability and environmental concerns. Recently, we also carried out a pilot to use more environmentally friendly road surfacing treatment called asphalt. Without going into too much detail, which uses recycled materials, requires less heating and mixing, which significantly reduces the carbon footprint of the road surface. This is not something that's been required of us by government, and this is something the Thurrock Council have done just to look to ways to improve not only our roads but also the local. Furthermore, this week we announced the great results from the pilot programme, which has seen a record number of pothole repairs completed at almost half the normal cost across the Thurrock road highways. And the council may give an update on this, so I will not steal this thunder. It really is really good work, and I'll probably repeat that again later. And it shows that we can provide far more cost-effective and greener ways to repair our roads and provide safe conditions for roads. Last week, the Prime Minister visited Port Tilbury to officially open Tilbury Terminal. Tilbury 2 is the largest freight ferry terminal in the country and is the site of what will become the largest construction processing site in Britain. It's just 1 year from planning permission being granted to the first ship docking at Tilbury. The visit by the PM is yet another vote of confidence in Thurrock, and the great opportunities are being created here by a number of developments, including the Thames Freeport. As we know, the Freeport generates more than £4.5 billion in new public and private investment. This will mainly in jobs, skills, communities and infrastructure. It's a terrific opportunity that's come from this, and this has been mainly due to hard work and dedication through this partnership working for Thurrock Council, along with Port's businesses and other councils in the area. During the Freeport bidding process, around 1,000 senior officer hours have gone into delivering the outline of the business case to government, which has led to this incredible partnership success for the borough. PM also had the chance to hear about the excellent work taking place in Tilbury as part of government funding of the new Towns Fund. This will create new facilities within the area, including the youth centre, as well as the new beach, and will be bringing improvements to the station area and boosting links between one of the most important ports in the region and the nation's capital. Very briefly on Clean Classic Affiliate, we've built 2,912 holes, for more than 99% of those within the agreed timeframes. We approved 1,419 flight tips, removed 1,900 tonnes of waste from the streets and open areas. We've issued 3,666 friendly notices for offences, including listeners, spitting and blocking cigarette butts. And finally, I will be sending an invite out later this week to our school councillors if they wish to take part in Operation Abbey, which will take place in Gracetown Centre on Friday the 18th. Operation Abbey is working in partnership with the local businesses and the police, council officers, charities to deliver a one-off community clean-up action day. All parties have volunteered in their free time to assist with the clean-up, and will be providing the tools to assist the removal of stickers on the shutters of the shops that blight the town centre. This will put us in a much better position when someone comes along and then refly posts by putting the stickers on there to take action against the companies that are advertising in this way. This is one of the things that we do get marked down on by people deciding on the scores that go through the year. So it really will make a difference to those scores, and of course it puts the shopkeepers in a position to be able to report, to remove them easily, and for us to take action. If this is a success in Grace, we'll also be looking to roll this out across the borough. As I say, that invite will go out to all councils by the end of the week. So with that, I'm going to move on to briefings on policy, budget and other issues. Anyone wish to bring anything forward tonight into the next meeting? Excellent. Petitions submitted by members of the public. I thought we had one in relation to the paint display sites.
I think that was submitted to the council rather than to public.
Oh, okay.
I haven't received anything.
That's absolutely fine. Questions from non-exec members. There aren't any, and the match referred to cabinet consideration by the scrutiny of relevant parts of the meeting. As I said at the beginning, I will be moving the order of the items to bring forward item 14, instruction of additional claim display sites within the Thurrock, which can be found at pages 195 to 204. To this part of the meeting, there's got members of the public here who also wishes to see how we make decisions on this, and then if he wishes to, he can leave after that item. So I'm going to hand over to Councillor Mayne.
Leader. Thurrock Council owns or maintains a large number of public car parks across the borough with responsibilities split between different departments. Currently, the usage of those car parks divides into two categories. There are paying display sites, and therefore subject to parking tariffs, or they're completely free and unrestricted. And that means they don't get enforcement officers. There's no control over how long people park there, and frequently they do park for hours or days at a time. But the real issue, I think, is what we notice over time is that the condition of some of our car parks have been deteriorating, and they've really reached a point now where intervention is required. Don't invest in some of our car parks, but frankly, there's a real risk that they'll have to be closed, and that's not over-egging it. It's we could say well, some of them are really dangerous, and the council has had 4 compensation claims made against it recently, and that's resulted in £24,000 worth of compensation being handed out to people. They're simply not costs that we can continue to sustain. Obviously, this isn't a decision we take lightly. We have looked carefully at the sites that we're proposing for parking charges. All of them are not ones that I think we say support businesses. They're predominantly parking areas that serve recreation grounds. So there's no real knock-on effects here for businesses, and that's I think something we've been clear to look at as we emerge from COVID. We don't want to see our high streets any more than we have to. The sites we're looking at are listed at 2.6. I'm sure that officers have had lots of discussions with users, and there are things we can do to try and minimise the impact on users, particularly in relation to stuff like recreation grounds or permits. I believe there's an area of the recreation ground which doesn't form part of the car park area, but could potentially be given over to you. They could use that exclusively, and having what we can do to try and help them even more. One of the things we'll propose tonight is that we limit the hours or the days when the terrace apply. So being 24/7 with Monday, Friday, 4 p.m. So I hope and say we'll see that we are doing what we can to find users, but we're open to further discussion. In terms of the income this produced, that money is ring-fenced to parking services. So the intention is to use the funds that these additional paying display sites will generate to improve the car parks across the borough, and the remedial work to the proposed paying display sites will take place before the charges are imposed. So there will be an improvement in the condition of those car parks before people start paying to use them. It's really difficult, I think, to try and get an idea of the income this will generate. The car parks are currently completely unrestricted. They're not monitored, so we have no clear data in terms of how many people park there throughout the day, but it's estimated that it will produce about £160,000 worth of income counts. And as I say, that ring fence, they go back into parking services, improve our car parks and make them fit for purpose. I think it should be remembered at a pertinent point, the council has to pay business rates on that car park, and that income will help offset that. If we weren't to adopt the recommendation, the council still has to sustain that cost. We have to pay business rates on that car park whether we charge for them or not. So that is that's a financial burden for the council to offset that. I just want to say something about the country park season ticket. That's one way we could be looking at, particularly Langdon Country Park. We know it's well used. We know that people cherish the country park. We want to make it easy for them using that. One of the things we're going to do is introduce a season ticket which will allow people to park there for much reduced they take up that offer. Paul goes on to talk about ANPR. I know that's not a recommendation, but it's something that I'm very happy we adopt. Some of these sites are remote, they're going to be hard to enforce. Maximise income, that's something I'm really curious to look at, and I will be set off early enforcement effort. That's something we'll cover. I don't think there's much more to say. It's the report is quite clear, the sites are listed. I think I've explained why we're doing this, why we have to do it, and I've explained what we've done to try and minimise the impact on users. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Just for open transparency, we've received at least 3 letters, one from the Director of the Mother Villiers, one from the Brandon Groves FC Chairman, and one from the General Secretary of Wales Cricket Club in relation to Ockenden Rec. So I am pleased to see that that's been listened to. I'm sure actually 2 local councils have to be on cabinet. I'm sure they'll equally be happy. But just for clear clarity, what you're saying, Councillor Main, is the South Ockenden Rec, there won't be an opening time for this is in place. It will be 8 till 4. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think times aren't set in stone. I think what I'm trying to say is if they don't work, we'll look at them. But the charges are imposed to try and accommodate the users. I think one of the things I perhaps didn't, in terms of why this side, why have we picked the pension side? The reason that we've looked at South Ockenden Recreation Ground is because some of the users, but also the public, have been complaining to the council for a long time about people using car parks and then go off on London, or more specifically local office work, are parking there all day, and they're using our car park space, which users and then by themselves. So that's abuse of the car park. So there is a legitimate reason for doing this. It's not only about income, trying to make sure that the parking provision there is effective for people who are using the recreation ground going off into there's a doing this, and actually it came about when asked to do something, and there's no other real way of regulating public car park. Let's do something.
But obviously, with the weekend now not being part of enforced times, again, it's going to make clear that those users of the rec are going to use it as a sports club that use visiting teams and visiting players. So, are there any other questions? So, Jeffrey's first.
Thank you, and I welcome the change so that sports club at the ground now will be able to use the car park, and an idea of stopping commuters from using it. Welcome, but I just wondered if you'd consider looking at wider problems that in Ockenden of commuters using all the residential areas to park, and whether there's some way that we could ask officers to look into a permit system so that residents can park in their roads and not have the problem of commuters filling up the roads with their cars while they go on.
Yeah. So, just to say thank you to the council. Quickly read. Thanks for listening. Like myself, very efficient.
Yeah, sure. I think very valid point. But I've always felt really that all the communities that are found parking closely at Stanford West, closely at Tilbury and Praise. I think we've got that right there. I don't think we have still too many pressures that due to parking in areas, and indirectly a consequence of what proposing could be that success rate. Proposing to charges run, there's a risk that those parkers will look, those drivers will look other residential roads for parking freely. So more than happy to take that away. Something we have to do. Otherwise, we're going to be here again looking at problem all over again. And I know you've been for a very long time, but some areas if you can extend them into places around the station. Frankly, it's hard to do. They're not already covered by some kind of restricted parking. But more than happy for that to be think it has to go hand in hand. Go ahead with this. It's not going to be going to another one.
Any other questions? Okay, because we didn't have part of the report at 2.6, which is the proposals on to reduce tariff charges and the relevant traffic regulation orders following car park 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, because that's clearly not going to happen at South Hopkins in Recreation Centre. Mark, do we need to change that and a recommendation, or do we?
Again, leader, probably put to add additional words on making a change that is quite clear.
Okay, so what I'm suggesting then is at 1.2, and I'm doing this on the field obviously, is that the recommendation as at, sorry, the proposal as at 2.6, they introduced tariff charges of relevant TROs 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, does not apply to South Hopkins Recreation Centre car park, and times in relation to enforcement will be listed following consultation with the users of the sport facility. That's unreasonable. Yeah, excellent. So with that, we've got now two recommendations of page 195, 196, which is the one that's listed and the one that's best read out. I'm sure that officers will put it in terms of either. So with that, are we all agree?
Agree.
Excellent. So before we move on to the next item, so with the charge, really, that the outcome will
80% of it, yes. I think very much from premise critic perspective, I think that's workable. I think that might be true. I think that's something that
the reason I left it open and not put specifics on there is that it allows the TRC to communicate with us as well. I'm sure it's fair to discuss.
yes, I understand that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No. I think you're more welcome to stay. If you wish to, but if you wish to leave, again, so,
It's been a big campaign.
Can I just say that meeting isn't aimed at you. Anything we and so that you
Yeah, right in with it. Thank you.
So we'll move back to substantive agenda in the order that it appears. So item number 10 is the draft general fund budget and medium term financial strategy update, which is
Thank you, Leader. This budget is very much a social care first budget. Our key focus is going to be, has to be, and will be on children's and adult social care. Thurrock, like all councils, continues to face pressures in social services, certainly following COVID, and we have to simply make decisions or proposals to ensure that services charged with keeping our young people and older population cared for can work as best possible. Delayed referrals as a result of social restrictions continue to put immense and extraordinary strain on the council, as it does to councillors who also facilitate social care. So the proposals are for a 1.99% increase in council tax to be allocated entirely ring-fenced on children's social care, and a 1% increase on the adult social care precinct. That's 2.2 million plus going into social care services. In terms of service budgets, this means the following movements. So in adult social care, the budget in 21-22 was 47.329 million, and the budget in the forthcoming round, pending obviously approval in February, 22-23 would be 49.247 million. Children's social care, 21-22 was 41.868, and pending approval will move up to 42.931 million. This means an annual increase of spending on adults by 4%, and the nearly 3% extra in children's social care. Now, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Cooling will be more articulate than I am, some of the pressures, and I'm sure they'll talk about that. But we face a clear choice, and it is a choice. We can choose not to. We can choose not to increase resilience and services, services which have attracted national headlines for when issues go wrong in other councils or not as they should. Just for context, between this year and next year, we're looking at about 10% growth of pressure on those services. At 7.2 million, and 7%, which basically needs to come from anything other than taxation. I'm not sure I can really say it in many other ways. I was once reminded, when I was reading this paper again, I was once reminded of when we transitioned from opposition to administration, I was reminded by someone who's still a councillor that the reality of being in administration is a far cry from being in opposition. It's not often I'll credit him for too much, but the truth be told is he was right. Political expediency cannot trump doing the right thing, but of course it doesn't also mean that this is easy either. There is recognition of that, but this is about doing the right thing. But here, with social care pressures as they are, with public bodies like the LGA cementing their own views that local government is under extraordinary strain, particularly social care policies like ours, it would be negligent and wrong to starve social services at this time. Indeed, having spoken to the Section 151 officer, I should expect that his forthcoming Section 25 statement, something which is obviously authored by the 151 officer and is distanced from any involvement from other senior officers or elected members, will be incredibly social care centric. Of course, there are those who will find this extra increase a burden. A postage stamp per week may just be a little bit too much, especially if they are required to fund services that they're not actually using themselves at that point in time. But altruism, of course, is not easy when people wake up and worry about how they get to work, how they feed the family, if they need to put off the dentist appointments that can't afford it anymore, or whatever the spend is that's come up that's needed. Inflation is an issue. Now, clearly, Thurrock Council can do a lot, but it cannot control a number of external variables or every external pressure on households. But what we can do is control the generosity of what support is available to households who may be struggling, by sustaining that benefit to the tune of 8.5 million, up from 7.7 million, like we did in 2021 for the local council tax support. That is further supported by band A to D properties receiving at some point in the future £150 payment towards council tax. Crudely, that means about 61,405 households in the borough will get around, not each, I hasten to say, but a window of 9.2 million spread out with that one-off support for all those households. And my last message is, as it always is, if you are in crisis, please reach out, even if you can see yourself heading in that direction. The cost of a first class stamp can be more than a large burden to bear, and I want to stress that help and support is available, and we'll do whatever we can, however we can. The recent Levelling Up paper has provided some headline detail around long-term funding for councils. The government is committing to ensuring that the funding allocations for councils are based on up-to-date assessments of needs and resources. The data used to assess this has not been updated in a number of years, with some dating back as far as 2000. So over the coming months, the government will be working closely with our sector and other stakeholders to update this, consulting on those changes. As part of this, the government will look at options to support local authorities through transitional protections. One-off grant funding provided in the local government finance settlement in 22-23 will be excluded from those protections. Of course, we will proactively engage. Why? Well, for those who do not understand why Thurrock entered an investment approach, our budget in 2021-22 is circa 150 million, which is made up of £70 million worth of council tax income, less than 40 million or just under 40 million on business rates, 10 million of other grant funding, and presently £30 million worth of investment income. Without the 30 million investment income, £30 million gap. The gap which was successfully closed for 4 years through the approach that all members signed up to. But what does that actually mean? What does £115 million worth of income or £30 million a year, what does that actually mean? But in context, it's the entirety of the public realm department. Two gentlemen in front of me, your entire department would be theory might not exist if that funding wasn't there. That's how significant we're talking. Councillor Hoon and I was talking about 68 to 70% of the adult social care budget. I've just been talking to you about social care. I think that's probably landed the context. But the one thing that we haven't discussed in it is that Had the 49 members not supported that approach in 2017, then council tax would have had to increase for every household by a further 42% over the last 5 years, or £432 of each household bill. That is quite significant. That is the context behind why we did what we did. Then members made a choice. Conservative, Labour, UKIP, then TIP. We rejected a further 42% of tax increases and embarked on an approach which did lead to £150 million worth of services, increased their reserves by 300%, and withstood a 23-month-long adult-centric health crisis. Now rule changes are coming, driven by other councils' approaches. We have another choice. We can increase tax, or we can cut the size of the council's clock. If we've made our choice, it will be the latter. That means that things will have to change. It means that less will be offered, but we will innovate. We'll do things differently, more efficiently. We have to count the size of the clock, but with a public, with a quality-first mindset, which always seeks to put services at the heart of everything that we do. So it might mean that things are delivered in a slightly different way, but the outcomes will be better or improved or the same. Look at children's centres back in 2018, I think it was then. The outreach from that reform, people would say saw the damn things was hanging over it because of cuts. Actually, what it's done is increase outreach from 75% up to nearly 90%. I think it may have actually gone over 90%. That is the difference by thinking about different things. And sometimes facts have to be up a wall to create that innovation. But that's where we are. That's what we have to do. So obviously, I have to take any questions. That's the draft.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We've got 3 minutes up. So the first one was
Might sound like a problem. Do anything other than the of this inflation is, and I can't vote. And it's dangerous, irresponsible, bad for this. Taking responsibility seriously, doing what needs to be done. Share with that view, understand the gravity, responsible, share that or not.
Councillor, do you want to respond?
Yeah, you said that very aptly. It was brought up. We had a whole conversation at corporate scrutiny about the draft budget. Last moment, it was dropped in that 2 particular members of the committee wouldn't be voting for the recommendations to come to the committee. Yes, they were affiliated to the same party. I was asked about it at full council, and I presented that, and obviously you just articulated what I've done with mine. I think the one thing I didn't mention in my opening statement was that this is an under-inflation. So yes, inflation is high. It's we've seen some of the headlines about where it is and where it might be going and stuff like that. But this is an under-inflation increase. And again, to go back to the point, postage stamps still may be too much for some people. Won't rehash everything, but the support is there, and that's why we've done what we've done with the extra 7 million. Bump up the LCTS up to 8.5 minutes really help those that do have that. Thanks.
Councillor, I'd just like to say,
And again, I said it at full council as well. Very well charged. Expensive. And that period, that experience, very valuable, accepted well. Quite frankly.
Add a bit more explanation. Do that, just going to say that on page 24, 4.7, it's the wrong paragraph. in January, we explained that our jumbled up and we agreed a new paragraph. It still says reduction in data services and actually we've amalgamated.
For the benefit of the minutes, it's exactly the same correction that we made last time.
Yeah,
So obviously, everything else has been updated.
Yeah,
Why read
that's
that?
So, yeah, I mean, Ian, Wade and Lee spinning in the net, doing everything possible to keep our ad up and social care costs under control and make sure Thurrock taxpayers' money is spent wisely and best effect for residents. This is evidenced by Thurrock spending about 20% of its overall budget adult social care to some of spending 55%. We have one of the lowest spends in employable care, spending tens of millions more. More importantly, this is the quality of care. Transformation program that we're in the process of. Whilst an incredible task for those involved, it's important for our care teams to work closely with other health professionals such as NHS. Provide not only better job satisfaction to our staff and make practice place work, but to our residents, better care, more flexibility, and improving the independence of our most vulnerable adults. By upskilling staff, co-working with other professionals and sharing budgets, our commissioning team working to get better and more from our service providers. That and some grant funding, it kept us stable. Let's not underestimate the effects of the last couple of budgets. Inflation has risen. Not only do we need to make sure our care staff feel appreciated, but to attract more those that choose to leave for a new, maybe easier path or retirement goal. We've seen an extra 800 plus vulnerable residents join our adult social care register in our care and support, and I think it's well documented that the effect of the NHS having to drop the ball in preventative care to manage an unprecedented health crisis during the pandemic has and will continue to affect the quality of our health for a while yet. Whilst the extra 7,000 from 1% adult care very welcome addition to our budget, we've got to put that into perspective that if we spend that 800, that would only £100,000 a year towards their care, which we know is going to cost more than that. So I'm glad to see that, like you said, you know, that the price of a postage stamp is what we're talking about here, and for some that is going to and there is help, as you say, which is great, that wasn't there in the past. But I have to welcome the precept as an addition to our budget, and it will be used wisely. It shouldn't out that how much to control adult social care spend, and we're now at a stage of balance between cost and quality. So we must recognise that as a council, we're under enormous budget pressures all round. Being adult social care is still budget pressures in recent years. So it's critical to start managing and doing our best.
Thank you.
Then, so it was Councillor Johnson.
Yes.
So I'm looking
If you-
Thanks for that compliment. And I want to say as well for the hard work that you and yours are. Yeah. I'd just like to make some comment around children's services, which is a statutory duty of the first duty. This service continues to face prejudice. And I know I've spoken of this previous occasions, but I make no apology for bringing it back to your attention. Children's and family services county tax daily challenge after children within those boundaries. The department continues to look for efficiency
driving down administration costs, and an ambitious transformation program by individual or solo child placements commissioned by Thurrock, providing Ofsted standard accreditation, proposing to commission it as this is an urgently needed extension to our program. Average weekly placement cost increasing at an alarming rate. We're seeing costs ranging between 20,000 but to show we are doing all we can to improve our service to the informed cabinet recently received report from Ofsted's latest confirming the great strides special education needs team have made in addressing previous areas of since the 2019 visit. It's tremendous result for children. But the high levels of support and care we provide for vulnerable children. Also buck the trend of child poverty as working closely with public health, right to future strategies and indeed our own strategy. Coupled with the excellent work undertaken by council housing teams in calling time on street homelessness, is to reduce the numbers of people in low areas. I believe it is good to find we're on the right track in protecting our local vulnerable. Whilst I'm not someone who advocates simply throwing money at somebody to make say that the proposed ring-fencing for council tax be a very welcome initiative. Ensure we continue doing protect some of the vulnerable not on resourceful effect children's social care. Thank you.
Any speaking? It's pretty much already been covered, but I can assure you at other meetings I attend, like cabinet, up and down, we're experiencing their experience. Some more so, some of them are 80% of their total income spent on it. Some of them say they're looking towards 90% of the budget in the next 5 years. So yeah, we're not in that group alone. But when we start hearing 20, 30,000 pounds, when we get a 1% increase on adult social care, but at the same time, that increase in our national insurance costs, both of local authority and individuals go through adult social care, but the majority of that healthcare aspects of it, rather than the authority aspects of it, we are heading all of it for a very serious situation. Probably over the next 5 years, I do blame this drug again. We shouldn't just be talking about adult social care and price. Children's social care is hurting towards this with these astronomical costs. When I mentioned fee, I'm not going to say which local authority, but over half don't only some of these placements are 8 in other areas. That's phenomenal. You just can't imagine how can you spend that amount of money in 1 week for one child's care. Because, sometimes there's not 24-hour care with lots of medical needs, so on. This is just for unregulated placements. So I do bang that drum. I do bring it to attention. I think we need to be making a lot more of this nationally. It's not just our social care, it's all the social. And how much of that budget is rightly taken to protect animals, but that leaves less and less each year to be able to spend on what we pass as our discretionary services. It is great. It is a below inflation increase. Inflation hits us just as much as it hits in. It's not that 5.1 here on the news, day in, day out. This is the increase in wages, what is proportionate to that. So, as I've mentioned a couple of times before, for every 1% we increase the salaries in Thurrock, that's 1.6% sustainable. So that does need to be addressed. Not for by not increasing staff salary, but making sure the amount of increase is it is fundable. Yeah, and that also goes with services that are provided to us. They will also see that increase in salaries and national insurance costs and inflation and fuel costs and everything else that everybody else is suffering from. I used to say suffering, seeing increases in food prices, but also increases in fuel prices. So we'll see that effect. Unfortunately, we're not immune from that. We say, you know what, do this year just to support. We haven't got the ability to do that, especially when we know that those increases continue year on year. Not just those external things, but the ones we can't prevent. Vulnerable children coming into adults needing, as well as an expanding borough, but actually a council tax base that isn't really expanding it. Needs to actually cover. Obviously, yeah, that's something else that officers are looking at. There is talk of national revaluation of council tax banding. As council tax professionals, both Councillor Johnson and I have heard this. I've heard this since 1993 when it came in. It'll be in 5 years at 1998, and then it was maybe 2000, and then it was maybe 2005, and every successive government, irrespectively, moved that forward. But you're never going to buy a property in Thurrock for £40,000. This is based on 1991 prices. So yeah, there does need to be that reevaluation of where people sit within the bands, but I need to make clear that doesn't automatically mean everybody will pay more. More band D equivalence actually means the amount of council tax band D below starts to decrease slightly. It's only above that you start to see an increase. It's a mathematical process, but at the moment we still need to raise a certain amount subdivided by the number of properties in certain bands. So that will also have to change. That's primary legislation. Anyone that knows primary legislation changes take forever. So I won't be holding our breath to see anything decided yet or even a year. So but when that happens, obviously we will see what impact. It is also really annoying because the vast majority of that was under to other local. And luckily enough, again, similar meetings that I attend, there are all of those contributors saying, this is, we're losing X amount, and I'm saying that we're losing nearly what we raise in council tax year on year, if not more, in business rates. Goes into the systems that's held by other local authorities. Left here, we will be able to do so much more. Let's face it, it's residents of Thurrock take the brunt in the busy roads. The busy roads, that comes from it is because businesses are improving. We know that all of our large businesses are looking to carbon zero by 2030 or more, which is great, but it will not stay the fact that we take it back. So it's a little bit cool, we do so much. That's been on the great cool work. So good.
Just saying that since that was announced, with that referendum on leaving the European Union, had 3 years of purgatory. How do we leave the European Union? We've left the European Union. We had a year's transition following leaving the European Union, just gone through a pandemic. That piece of work has been going on for a very, very long time. So I'm not quite sure whether that's coming over the hill anytime soon. And in fact, all the movies you can government is, like you said about council tax, yes, we're definitely going to look into that.
Yeah.
Full stop.
So I was on meetings this morning where that was raised again, some will contribute, some will receive it. So receivers saying, well, we haven't got business or support, so we would be in dire straits versus we have to get it up just so large. So we've got a number of recommendations on page 16 from 1.1 to 1.7. I don't intend to read them all out as a all three.
Agreed.
Thank you. So moving on to capital strategy on page 49. Again, that will be Councillor Head.
Thank you, Leader. Capital strategy is an enabling report, effectively, which is designed to articulate parameters in which members can sense a borrowing activity for two very distinctly different things, one for capital projects and one for historic investment activity. So, having reflected, I asked for changes to be made to the presentation of this report. go to pages 55 and 56, there is a slight change. I mean, it's only slight, but I think it's important. We've now got table 1A and 1B, and the reason why that is because it differentiates the activity associated with capital projects, and it differentiates that between investment activity and any forward plans. Obviously, you can see table 1B, you can see that there are 4 very clear zeros in the 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24, and 24, 25 columns in terms of any new investments. So sort of making very clear that the decision that members made for capital strategy paper in February 21 for the years is still solidified, and there is no current intention to change. I would take the moments just to clarify the split between the borrowing of the council. So if you look at page 49, I've added a summary there to help again make that split a little bit clearer. You've got the capital project programme, which is 550.58 million, which is obviously a combination of general funds, HRA and TRL projects. And then you've got the now historical capital investment activity, which is projected to be funded by 915.7 million pounds worth of borrowing. So, just to clarify, it's not 1 billion, it's not 1.4 billion, it's actually 915 million. It's not quite what sometimes is said. That will continue to drop as investments conclude over the next several years, as we've talked about, but the paper in front of us allows us to maintain existing investments until their conclusion. Obviously, it's those investments which generated 115 million pounds worth of income. It earned 29 million pounds for other councils and their own and other public bodies, their own services and residents. It helped us increase reserves from 8 million to 24 million, a rise of 300%. As we said, had we not had that, we would have been in a perilous state. Not done what we've done. Pre-COVID, feels like a long time ago now, the council had a 3-year balanced budget and a surplus of 5.5 million pounds. What do I miss the days where we used to argue with the opposition over what we were going to spend the surplus on? But what it also done, with it, saying it in jest, is it did avoid tax increases of 42% on top of what was the increase over the last 5 years. The major borrowing, like I already said, is associated with capital projects, which we discussed there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Has anyone got any questions in relation to the capital strategy report? I mean, can I say it was right? Page 49 where it outlines where the money is going. Wording everything all into one does sort of gloss over the low vote situation that we inherited from previous administration. The capital project spends that we paid for roads or plus of course it's still a significant amount, 7 million in borrowing for the capital investment, but we need to be clear because we do hear this when we're not never miss a payment. Always been right amount of it. It's only because of other reasons. COVID, local authorities stopped doing this lending. We do have local authorities to invest the money in other ways. Great themselves in. We speak to other leaders regularly. So roads and where that. So we really have done. That does mean we need to pay to the money. So I think this is much. We're not. Other local residents. of course, the type of investment. Electricity. I know we don't. Credits as it, but you know,
Your last point about double size of Thurrock. Be that cost, like you say, there's only it's cost a different look at the United Kingdom. What a difference that makes. That was twice over, and it aligns with the climate move. So, you know, I'll look back at some advocate for that. An interesting bit. Very, very complicated as Councillor Duffy. But effectively, you know, pension fund. But there's a whole conversation levelling up, which is actually encouraging LGPS start investing more, which I thought was quite weird because obviously the conversations around narrowing the restriction of the local authorities to it. Then on the other hand, like LGPS schemes, local government pension schemes, are potentially being incentivised to do it. So yeah, it's all.
And because that's invested on Crest Local.
Yes.
As well. So it really is, you know, I think we that correction investment strategy in position investment. So you know, but we would hope member of pension. Like with another couple of members here, but yeah, why wouldn't they? There's a number of things, Crest Local, year on year.
Mechanism of that for. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got, is there anybody else which is speaking? Discussion, no, so we've got recommendations on page 50 to 51. I'll leave all of them. Excellent. Move on to page 81, and that is things and charges, pricing strategy.
So the fees and charges report is a cross-departmental report. It communicates and articulates services which are sort of largely discretionary in nature or set by the national government. When I say discretionary in nature, they're services that typically aren't in the core offering of what the executive profession do, but it's an option that residents can choose to make use of. Not always the case. I need to stress it isn't as simple as that, but there is an element to that. And some of the, obviously, fees and charges are set by national government boundaries. Whilst we move to a world which needs to adapt to be ready to service our social care needs, as income reduces for the reasons we've already spoke about, the council continues to consider the local market when setting fees for the more discretionary fees and charges. And I think something that we were talking about earlier with Councillor Mainey's report in terms of the benchmarking and the recently issues of parking is because other councils have sort of cottoned on to the insurance risks or the maintenance risks, or those aren't happy with a run-down car park, which is a showcase for their borough. You know, to be honest, country parks are often what people know areas to be. How many people in the east of our borough know places over Basildon and Brentwood because of South Wimbledon. People probably know more about South Wimbledon than they do Brentwood. And it is a reflection of that environment. There's a reason why that happens, and the reason why we've looked at the market and tried to level that up. Others, we need to obviously ensure a market is attractive and competitive, i.e. they incentivise people to use the service, but without sending them off elsewhere. And that's the conversation we was having earlier. And provide a degree of self-funding, so that services are not part of a poor council officer, that are not therefore subsidised disproportionately by wider taxes, which could and potentially should be spent on core council service requirements such as social care and environment. Effectively, if we're funding other things, then obviously social care, environment, and other of our priorities. So we're aware of the feedback presented by ONS on a number of matters of the entire fees and charge schedule. That is appendicised, whether I don't know, that's in the document, or the report rather, and allow colleagues to go over their own department's fee and charge details.
It does say it. Has anyone raised any specific issues in relation to fees and charges in their general shape and effects? No. I will say this year on year, whilst I'm still known as leader, it's still disappointing, and I hear this again more and more often from other leaders, irrespective of affiliation. Up and down the country, is where we've got statute charges, i.e. ones that change for whatever reason, if you want to decrease them or increase them to incentivise or de-incentivise that type of use of service, we can't. So I will year on year say that it's about time that the central government gives local government, as part of the Levelling Up agreement, and to empower local authorities' ability to set all of their own charges themselves. Some of these are quite clearly what they face, some don't. So where they don't, we end up with council taxpayers having to fund that particular service. Now, it may not be very often that it happens. I don't know how often the weights and measures team will go around to a pub and check everything that's there because it's on waste. But there was a set charge nationally for, I don't know if that was wipe space because it was used at all, but obviously year on year it's there. And there are other things that we should be able to have control over, licensing for gaming machines and so on, again set nationally rather than locally. So always again right nationally and ask if the power we give to local authorities to set their own fees accordingly. You're quite right. Again, we have mentioned this before. Some years we don't put up parking charges, other years we do. Sometimes we don't put up parking charges because it's a penny, 2 pennies. We end up waiting until another year. We do need to be making clear year on year when we don't put them up that we will be putting them up, and may well put them up rather than suddenly.
That's your point. Fair enough, fine. Each sounds dramatic. Seismic as but that's what might be appended. But yeah, sorry, I just thought.
Absolutely. So any other feedback? This all makes in that case, project ones Are they agreed and very excellent? And we'll move to item 13, which is the council revenue account, which is
Very much. Have a lot of background. We've got a worldwide. I mean, Bank of England. One. In that all. Carry on. Building this. Get rid of. Do that for service. That might have.
thank you.
Same pocket next year, and they're there at 30-year high, I think, in terms of inflation. That's the context. That's the context of it, and where it has gone shows that getting 400 quid last completely what less than what it know that there are things that we've got. This
You can. It's always a different. Yeah, public first. Difference when private sector that a lot. Yes, you were. As we all were. As we all were, and I think it's only this year that they're at the point where they were.
And that's something we big plans. can't, I mean, that's it, don't we?
And of course, we can't forget, you know, they make it more, so more money is actually spent on the or process that we, you know, I suppose whether you're doing your touching it. But if you look at the table 5, things that we need to do, carbon reduction requirement, one should the external cladding or council home goes into the middle.
I mean, I have to. Again, there are a lot. That is just reality.
Yeah, absolutely. A number of times we've had when we're in opposition about if this isn't done, it's not just this year where we actually have that cannot up with ourselves without inflation. Yeah, with the positive services in the communal areas, so that's just going to go up. Again, the money doesn't come. The HR. So, I did.
Again, and
Yeah, I will say we're making hay. Yeah, making sure the right things like tenants get the way selling property. You know, I must be listen to house, and we've got, and you know, some of these and they just weren't designed. So and that's why I did kind of mention that climate change. Anyway, page 184, five increase. Very excellent, thank you. As we know, we've already dealt with item 14, so we'll move to item 15, which is page 241, place forward, which is the introduction, sorry, is the single-use plastics policy, which is Councillor Jeffries.
This report really is the start of a long journey that everyone has to join. We are going to help protect the environment. I'm sure we've all seen damage to the environment. The local authority, we have a responsibility, for example, this policy completely plastics overnight. Start sure welcome by everyone. It also clearly demonstrates, I think earlier, commitment, demonstration to sustainable environment.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffries. Any questions?
Seen firsthand part of the journey of trying to make plastic bottles recyclable. With plant care, we changed it from 100% non-recyclable to 80% recyclable, 10% non-recyclable. Down to 100% afterwards. And I think this is really, I think we have to recognise what private sector people are doing to achieve this, and I think this is one of those moments associated who you are, where you are, a bit like safety. This is a problem for you. So yeah, I think you're right. I think we should certainly get into the setting out our own stories for what that looks like.
I think I was just going to come back is that I was hoping where single stuff, actually aware it's only some of the graphene. It's actually quite difficult to get rid of single-use plastics, but this is a start, and I think, like I said, by example. So,
yeah, it is. I don't too aggressive now. I've had conversations in relation to the single-use plastics and sit there and say a bit soft and put it is an annoyance. It was also, it's some of the things you don't think about. So PPE equipment coming in a plastic bag that's not recycling. So there is that knock on in the supply chain to say, well, actually we either don't want them back, or can you supply bags that recycle? So that range. Obviously this is done completely different. Actually, it's done for like the things like plastic bottles. Germany gives you your 25% money back. That you pay.
I'm old enough to remember the Alpine man.
Yeah.
Used to put that. Yeah.
So, but also return them to shops, and perhaps as we go forward as a nation, that's one of those things that we need to look at a national level. Certainly at a local level, making changes such as water bottles. I see Councillor Head's got his reusable one. I have got my reusable one. No water bottle, right? But you start getting used to bringing them with you at all times. So it's just about changing that approach. But also, and this was, and all credit to Councillor Burns, this, which is something that probably said that often, is that he raised this with me a number of years ago, pre-pandemic, and say about those plastic notices that go up on planning. So these are some of the most toxic used ones and recyclable and, housing. So we're now looking at a different way, putting those signs up, eco-friendly, and of course, less waste. Because again, that still needs to go into the waste, it still goes onto that. And that costs taxpayers money. It's a small amount, but it's still an amount. So I really do welcome this. It was, and I do often get quite some really good reads. To cabinet report. This was one that was a real enjoyment to read. And I know that, one of the things that we need to do after this evening is to ensure Councillor Burns is now a policy. And, he's not thanking making this an issue. But of course, our government's making it an issue, so we do need to do it. Probably more credit. So if we look at recommendation at 1.1, cabinet approved the adoption of single-use plastic policy as outlined. Is that agreed? Agreed. Excellent. Right, we move on to last item of the evening on page 313, which is Thurrock Roadside Memorials and Formal Tribute Policy. I noticed that it's in the name of Councillor Jeffries, but a lot of this does cross over into Councillor Maney. So I'm sure Paul will be making clear that the different aspects of, because we're using quite a lot of legislation in relation to highways legislation for some of this, but of course not all memorials are at the roadside. And we'll make sure that's all covered as we go through, not just for the roadside, but for the highways also. For environment. So I should pass to Councillor Jeffries first, and then if Councillor Maney wishes to add anything thereafter. So Councillor Jeffries.
I would like to start first of all by saying this is quite a difficult area to do. They all tribute kind of difficult time. Fatal collisions, people have lost their lives. So I realise to those residents have tried to handle it possible and ensuring that people that are affected by this, their operations take effect. So this policy statement is intended to be sensitive, like I said, to all those that are affected by such tragedies, family, friends, victims, and also sometimes people that are those that are living near the site of the affected by. So I'd hope that residents will agree that this policy, which we have widely consulted on, fair, balanced and sensitive approach. Whilst I'll leave it there because I think that the reports it all, we try to be as sensitive as possible. It is an issue that's brought by residents that live near these. Their thoughts. Those
Councillor Maney, anything you want to add in relation to the highways aspects of this?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I think this is right. It's not a nice subject to do. I think seeing certain people involved are not the kind of thing for a variety of reasons. I think just for some clarity, really, if you read the report and the strategy itself, policy itself, it does very much talk about roadside and gives the impression that it's only roadside memorials. The reason this has come in Councillor Jeffries' name and not mine is because it does actually relate to all counties. So I wouldn't want to read this as it's only at the roadside. It applies to our parks and our other bridge spaces as well. It's not just a highways issue. From a highways perspective, I think that can be a distraction. It may. So there are good reasons for doing this, but again, to be clear, it's about roadside. More. I don't think it's really. And I think, as Councillor Jeffrey said, there are people, yes, of course, sensitive to those who agree, but at the same time, there are people who don't want to see these. But my argument might play attribute reasonable, but a permanent shrine like them.
I agree entirely what Councillor Maney said, and I think what this policy will allow us to do is, when sadly these tragedies do happen, to be able to talk to the families and friends, so that, you know, space that, you know, they will be able to visit market, as in a lot of these cases, it's actually a dangerous place, because that's why the fatal collision happened. So policy gives us the direction to be able to, you know, help and support.
Anybody else? So, yeah, really, we do have to be really clear. This is not banning these roadside memorials, but having fun, liaising with the families of the closing, and creating, you know, a policy that helps them safely commemorate the life of those. It's also make clear that, you know, these will be that's a black spot. Actually, so we've seen this up and down the country. I think it's bikes or those bikes memorials in London, but before it's only can't stay attraction, and you know, those are lost their friends, saying this is actually a permanent reminder of this. This cuts a very fine balance of very delicate subjects. You know, we have seen a number of them spring up on our land. When we're doing this, and as I say, you know, this is a plan and proper liaison between council and those that have lost family members in the same.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that really. I mean, I think really this isn't so much a new policy. So we've had a policy for a long time. I remember one being passed. It was very much like this. So it's not like we're suddenly, you know, or something. Really just brushing what we all had. We haven't been the best at applying that policy for some time, and just really dusting off what we had and saying it's time to start. Really. It's not a new policy. We've had one before, and it's very much the same as this. So really doing something we haven't done before, just trying to start, you know.
I think that perhaps a clear extension is the age with that.
Yeah.
Maybe more their relatives and that. It's not just come scoop it up, throw it back. There needs to be a huge level of respect for members of instances. I think that is really quite good. So I'd like to thank Perry for sure that we're not just thinking about ourselves, we are thinking about those lost relatives of these accidents. So if there's nothing else to add, we do have the recommendation at 1.1 on page 213 that we approve the adoption of the new policy. Is that correct?
Agreed.
Excellent. So that concludes the business of the evening. I would ask in relation to item 14, Lucy, we've received a number of letters from this is what just making away from having the concept below that. So actually, I will and also meet on site. So with that, I message, by the way.